So Darren Waller is a guy who is having an absolute breakout season so far in 2019. He's playing very well so far. For a guy who had never had more than 85 receiving yards in a season, largely just due to not having that much playing time, this season he has had a breakout year as he's gotten 485 yards through 6 games. One of the things that I think really does definitely help Waller is just the fact that John Gruden is his head coach, and it's a type of system that likes to use tight ends, and so Darren Waller being their number one tight end, that's going to help. We saw it last year with Jared Cook coming to the Raiders. It definitely helped him then, and I think it's helping Waller here. I think it's really allowing Waller to shine. Like on this play, for example, what's going to happen is that's where Waller is, so he's lined up on the top half of the screen, and it's going to be a play action to the top half of the screen. However, he's going to go down to the bottom half of the screen. So there's several reasons you could be doing this. The first of which is what's happening, which is a play action, and then he tries to run to the bottom half of the screen and get open. But this is also something you'll do if it's an inside run where maybe you just want to pull him over so that Waller is the one blocking an edge rusher. It would give him sort of a running start against an edge rusher, so that's another option on this table. And as you see right when this ball is snapped, one thing you will notice is that Indianapolis player, he's not getting blocked here. So you would expect, if you are the Colts, that, okay, Waller is in charge of blocking him, got it, understand what's going on. But of course, as we know, Waller is not going to be doing that. Waller has to try to get by him, but he also has to make sure he gets by him in a way that doesn't give away the fact that it's going to be a passing play. So he's going to have to get by that Colts player very quickly. It's going to be all about speed and all about if he could just quickly run by him and then try to get open, and Carr can hit him to potentially gain some yards. But watch how he does that. It's good forward to get by him, and then Carr is able to hit Waller. Waller's able to turn up field, and they gain some yards. It's nothing crazy, but more often than not, you don't need something crazy. You just need some yards. That's why a good amount of the plays that I will show on this channel won't necessarily be the highlight reel plays. While I do like to show some highlight reel plays, I also like to show some of those middle plays because those are really important. And especially for a guy like Waller who is playing in a system like John Gruden's system, it's all about just gaining some positive yards. It's all about the you can't go broke making a profit style, and that's kind of why having Waller can really help them. Like this one's another one. It's just a pretty simple play, but it's going to be well executed, so that's why I'm going to break it down. It's going to be a cover 2 zone, and what they're going to do is have their number 1 receiver just run a go route along the sideline, and then Waller will just run underneath him. So the idea behind this, obviously, is that since the receiver is going to be running a go route, this will now force the Colt, who's in charge of covering the flat on that bottom half of the screen, to run deep with him, and then Waller will just be open underneath. That's the way this play is supposed to work. And after this ball is snapped, you will notice it's working out pretty well. There is absolutely some separation for Darren Waller to get open. Largely just due to the fact that he's a fast guy and he's able to get there quickly, but he's also a pretty good route runner, and so that really helped him get open. And then when Carr makes his throw, he's going to be able to adjust his body weight and still find a way to make that catch. Very good play by Waller, I thought. I know that, again, it's not going to make a ton of highlight reels, but like I said, not every play has to be a highlight reel level play. Just make the small plays and the big plays will come, and that's what he does. Really what I like about Waller is his speed mixed with his route running. I think that that's something that you look for in a receiver, obviously, but sometimes people will overlook those types of little things against a tight end sometimes. Obviously it's a thing you look at, but when you're looking at a tight end, a lot of guys will say, okay, we want a tall tight end who can get some jump balls. We'll want a big tight end who can block, which are definitely important things in a tight end, but having a good route running tight end really does you a lot. Like on this play, again, it's cover 2, and that'll be Waller's route. He's going to try to get in between the safeties and the linebackers, and basically this is just how quickly can he get there, and then can he get open for long enough. But what you're going to see is watch how he gets to that gap in coverage quickly, but then slows down right when he gets there. That allows Carr to make that throw and allow him to make the catch. That's a smart play right there. That's what you have to do in that situation. Sometimes, not necessarily sit down, but just slow down a little bit, make things easier on your quarterback. That's what happened there, and they were able to get the completion. It was just a small thing, but it did matter on that play. Those gaps in coverage aren't going to be open for too long, and for Derek Carr, he ideally in a perfect world doesn't want to have to make a throw too early. He would like to wait and see if he's going to have an opening and then make the throw, which is what he was able to do there. So that's kind of what they like to do with Darren Waller. They like to use him in ways that typically you would just use anybody in that type of system. That's kind of how you would use your tight end. That's what you would want your tight end to be able to do. And he's kind of just doing his job on these plays, not necessarily making plays happen out of nothing. But that doesn't mean he can't do more than just his job on certain plays. And this one will be a perfect example of that, where it's going to be a cover 3 zone, and then what Oakland is going to do is have the receiver on the bottom half of the screen run that route right there, a slant route to the middle of the field, and it'll be Waller running out to the flat on the bottom half of the screen. So kind of similar to that second play I showed you, where you're using a receiver to get guys cleared out of the area, and then you're going to send Waller to where they were, underneath them, try to pick up some yards. And after this ball is snapped, well, it's actually going to get sniffed out pretty well by the Colts. I mean, really, the Colts player who was in charge of covering the zone, second closest to the bottom half of the screen, kind of realizes what's going on. He's just playing good heads-up football, what you're supposed to do in that situation. So he's going to try to close this gap and not allow Waller to get too open. So while those first plays I showed you might have been a little bit more praising Jon Gruden than actually praising Waller, because it was more so the play working out than actually the player doing something well, although Waller still did his part on those plays, this play is very different. It has not worked out the way that Jon Gruden had intended when he called it. Waller is going to have to try to make a catch and turn up field and see if he can gain some yards, which is going to be tough since there is a Colts player right in his area. But watch how he is going to be able to pull that off. He gets a guy to miss and then gets the ball right around the 20-yard line. They get the first down just simply because Waller made a good move and nothing else. And that's the advantage of a guy like Waller, you know. Anybody can just do some of those things. Well, not anybody, but a lot of tight ends can do those plays I showed you earlier. But not a lot of tight ends can make that type of play. And he makes those types of plays, which is why he's been so successful in the Oakland Raiders offense. It's why he's easily on pace for an 1,000-yard season, which as a tight end is very much not easy to do. I mean, he makes good plays. So being a player who can play physically well, but also when you mix that with being a smart player, which I do feel like Waller is a pretty smart player, and this next play is going to be an example of that, but I do feel like Waller is a very smart player, and adding that onto his physical abilities and him just playing in a system that likes to use tight ends, it can really be a benefit to them. And here's the example of the smart play I'm talking about. The main thing I'm going to take a look at is just look at Waller, and that's his route. It's going to be just a simple route to the flat on the bottom half of the screen. This is a check down route, essentially. If what Derek Carr likes isn't open, then he throws it to Waller to potentially get some yards that way. That's the way it's supposed to work. And actually, right after this ball is snapped, Waller is going to be open right away, but there's going to be a problem, and it's that Carr just doesn't see him right away. And that's not blaming him. I mean, there's plenty of guys that he could potentially try to throw to here, but it just turns out that his last read on this play happens to be wide open. So I'm not blaming Carr, but this is the situation. Waller is open, but Carr doesn't see him. But what I like about this is watch how Waller is really just going to sit down. Just watch how he stays where he's at this entire time. And that time you see on the screen right now, that's how long it took from, not from when the ball was snapped, but from the last point I paused it. He essentially didn't move for just barely over 3 seconds. I mean, that is just, it's smart football. It's great patience. You know, typically at that long of a period of time, you want to start moving. You want to do something. But if you're open, just hang out. It's kind of like when I was in Boy Scouts, and what they would tell you is if you ever get lost, just stay where you're at. Because it's a lot easier to find someone who is just in one spot than it is to find someone who's moving around. Well, in that situation, if you're open, just stay in one spot. Obviously, if you weren't open, then keep moving and try to get open. But in that situation, when you're open and you're a check down, eventually Derek Carr will look to you if he has the time. So just hang out, wait for Carr to get to you, and that's what Waller did there. And also, of course, making a couple guys miss. That's always nice, too. You know, when you can not only get the check down and show good patience, but then have a good physical play and get even more open. That's what you like to see. One last play I like. This was a play from the game that just happened. This was another just well-executed play and a good play design. Nothing too fancy, but still a good play design. And here's how it's going to work. Oakland's going up against the cover one hole, which is actually perfect for them because they have a perfect type of play to try to beat a cover one hole. What they're going to do is send their two receivers on the bottom half of the screen to run those two routes right there, so that part might not look too great, but the key part of this is that one of the receivers is actually going to cross paths with a guy who's in charge of covering Darren Waller on this one. That Packers player who I have circled, he's in charge of covering Waller, but as you see, there's a route that's going to get right into his way, so them doing that can then allow Waller to simply run underneath and try to get a touchdown. That's the way it's supposed to work. It's essentially a pick play, and as you see right when this ball is snapped, there is a little bit of contact, but it's nothing that gets a flag called. The flag was actually called for an offensive holding, so this play didn't count. But I thought it was a pretty good play by Waller, and pretty well executed by the Raiders receivers, even though it didn't end up actually counting due to the offensive holding. And while it also could have been called an illegal pick play, I like to call not having them call it that way just because there was already some hand fighting going on between the corner and the Oakland Raiders player who eventually ran into the defender who was in charge of covering Waller, so that's why I didn't call it there. Typically the way the refs will call it is it's almost like in basketball where you almost kind of sort of have to be just not intentionally running into him, but if you're just running a route and the guy runs into you, then that kind of turns into not a flag. And again, that play didn't end up counting, so it's all kind of a moot point. But I thought it was just a good play of showing what Waller can do, what this Raiders offense can do. And I mean, Waller definitely did his part on that one. He got open very quickly because he is a pretty fast guy and a good route runner. So those two things definitely factored in on that play.